Today I'll show my top 10 builds for the depths in Albion Online, all specifically tuned for the 3v3 mode. Each of these builds plays a different role, so you can pick the ones that best fit your team or mix them together to create a comp that suits your playstyle. Some focus on crowd control, some on debuffs, some on steady sustained damage, and others are all about burst. I've also got a couple of solid healer builds at the end, so you'll have everything you need to put together a complete team. First, I'll give you a quick overview of all 10 builds, what they're good at, how they play, and where they fit. After that, I'll break down each one in detail and show you the actual gear setups in game. I'll go over what abilities to take, talk about which builds pair well together to form a strong comp, and cover some possible swaps and extra tips. So by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to play these builds and how to put together a team that can crush the depths. And if you're looking for a full guide to the depths covering all its features, mechanics and best practices, I've already got you covered with my master guide, which you'll find linked in the description below. Let's start with the first build, one of my favorite weapons for the depths and a super solid pick that fits into almost any team comp, the Heron spear. This build is all about applying immense pressure. You've got a ranged AoE stun, an AoE slow, and strong single target damage. Plus, you're surprisingly tanky since you'll be running the Heron spear with plate armor. It's an easy weapon to pick up, but hard to truly master. You need to land your skill shots and know exactly who to hit and when. Your stun can be used offensively to lock down kills, or defensively to peel for your team. And it's important to keep the right target pressured at all times, since your auto attacks alone do massive single target damage. If you're looking for a sturdy frontliner that's tanky, provides tons of utility, and still dishes out solid damage, the Heron Spear is a staple build that works well with pretty much anything. Next up, we've got one of my favorite weapons in Albion Online. And this one actually forms a top tier team in the depths when paired with the Heron Spear. It's also a very solid pick for any group on its own, the Bow of Badon. This build is all about disrupting the enemy team and weakening them while still putting out solid damage. The Bow of Badon's unique ability drops a lightning pool that damages enemies inside it, and even continues to hurt them after they leave. As long as they are affected by the debuff, any ability they try to cast will be interrupted. That gives you a crazy amount of disruption and pressure, similar to the Heron Spear, but in a completely different way. The Bow of Badon is pretty easy to pick up, but you need to be accurate with your skill shots. It's a ranged weapon, so your kiting skills matter too. To really master it, you'll need good game sense. Sometimes it's best to interrupt and debuff the healer so they can't do their job. Other times you want to hit as many targets as possible to spread team-wide pressure. So it's crucial to dump your abilities on the right targets, all while making sure you take as little damage as possible yourself. If you want to play a top-tier ranged weapon that's all about disrupting and interrupting while still dealing great damage, the Bow of Badon is the way to go. For the third build, I've got one that's totally busted. It's tanky, has crowd control and debuffs, and does an insane amount of damage on top of that. If you've played the depths, you've almost certainly already been a victim of this weapon. I can only be talking about one, the Hellspawn staff, also known as the Imp. This is another build that fits into pretty much any team comp. It's just so strong that any group will perform better by having one. I'll say right away, this build is very difficult to play. It's probably the most challenging one in the game right now, but if you get good at it, you'll have a massive impact inside the depths. It's all about a high impact rotation where you take a few hits, weaken enemies, pull them in, instantly stun them, and then transform into the Hellfire Imp to drop explosive AoE damage, followed by huge single target hits. And if that sounds complicated, just wait until you try pulling it off in PvP under pressure. That's not even the full rotation, but I'll break it all down in the detailed build section later. If you're up for the challenge and want something tanky, loaded with crowd control, and still capable of doing crazy damage, This is definitely the build you'll want to learn more about. Now I'm going to share a build that's so impactful you might even want to run 2 of them in the same team. I've actually seen multiple teams do it. If you do, your team ends up with 4 hammers on the field, while still leaving the 3rd slot open for a healer to keep them going. And if you know the game, you already know I'm talking about the Forgehammers. This build makes for a tanky frontliner that can go wherever he pleases, just like Dr. Mundo, and pretty much do whatever he likes. The funny thing is, you don't even have to run plate armor. The Forgehammer's unique ability gives you massive defensive buffs on its own, so you can pick other armors that make for even more damage. I wasn't joking about running 2 Forgehammers in one team. It's actually a very solid strategy. You end up with tons of interrupts, mobility, slows, and damage, all while still being tanky and hard to deal with. It's a build that has a lot going on and is difficult to kill or counter. It's also super easy to play, which makes it perfect for players who aren't as mechanically sharp yet, or for anyone just starting out and looking for an OP build. That's not to say experienced players won't benefit too, the skill floor is just lower, so it's easier to get value right away. So if it sounds fun to charge into the enemy's face, slow them, continuously knock them up, and dish out a ton of damage while being hard to kill, the Forgehammers are exactly what you're looking for. Up next, we've got a build that's typically top tier in pretty much all of Albion's content, so it's no surprise it's strong here too. It's a very flexible weapon that fits into many team comps, and honestly, any team will benefit from having one. If you're into gigantic swords, you're in for a treat, because the carving sword is easily one of the top 10 builds for the depths. The carving sword is a bruiser weapon you can play in a lot of different ways. Your main job is to pierce through enemy targets, weaken them, and keep dishing out tons of damage as you stick to whoever you've decided to pressure. You've got tons of mobility to help with that, so even if enemies try to kite or run, you can always close the gap. Depending on your gear, you can build it for more disruption, extra utility, or just raw damage. It's easy to play and doesn't have a high skill ceiling either. Most of the time, you'll just be going full monkey on the healer. Aside from picking the right target, you'll also want to minimize the damage you take yourself, since the build I'll show is actually in cloth armor. Knowing who to weaken and when is pretty much where the difficulty lies. It's all about synergy with your teammates. So if you want to weaken enemies, get right up in their face and never let go thanks to your high mobility, all while putting out a ton of damage, this is definitely the build for you. When the game offers instanced, sweaty, competitive PvP, the Red Raven is unmissable. This is a staple build across all similar content types, so it's only natural for it to be on this list too. Once again, we've got a weapon that fits into a ton of team comps and pairs well with pretty much any other damage dealer. You can literally run this with any of the builds I've mentioned so far, or any that will follow. And of course, I'm talking about the Carioncaller. When you send out the Red Raven, you reduce healing received for anyone hit by it for a few seconds. As if the constant bleed ticks weren't enough pressure already, now the enemy also has to deal with less healing across the board. And for your last ability, you've got options. A boost of adrenaline to make you faster and stronger, a deadly chop to shred enemy resistances, or even a charge that not only cuts enemy healing received even further, but also boosts the healing your own party gets. So yeah, the Carioncaller doesn't just stack huge debuffs, it brings plenty of pressure and damage too. And the best part, it's easy to play. You don't need to be super mechanical to have a huge impact. Combine that with how well it fits into any team comp, plus the fact it's always been a top pick for instanced PvP, and you've got almost no reason not to play it. If you want a build that's historically been strong in this kind of content, easy to pick up, and that brings massive debuffs, pressure, and overall impact, then the Carioncaller with its beautiful Morgana Raven is exactly what you'll want to run. Now let's go over a build that's kicked my own ass so many times in the depths, it basically had to make this list. Unlike most of the other builds I've mentioned so far, this one needs more of a team comp built around it to really shine. But once you've set it up properly, it gives you a huge advantage before the battle even starts. The Arctic Staff has immense poke, range and damage. It can bring an entire team down to half HP before they even get a chance to react. And when they finally try to answer, they're met with tons of crowd control and quickly realize how much mobility you have and how pointless it is to chase you. This is a build that's difficult to play and takes time to master. You need to be good at kiting, landing your abilities, and keeping pressure up constantly by dealing damage. Your positioning has to be perfect, so you don't take hits yourself, since you are very squishy. And you have to be precise, because the moment you miss your spells, all that pressure is instantly gone. It's definitely one of those builds that looks easier than it actually is, but once you get a grip on it, it's incredibly rewarding. So if you want to play a mage with great range, plenty of crowd control, solid mobility, and one that can give your team an advantage before the fight even starts, this Arctic Staff build is exactly what you'll want to pick up. Up next is a build that's quickly found its way into every part of Albion, including the competitive PvP scene. It's very similar to the Carioncaller in what it offers, but even nastier. The Rotcaller fits well in any team comp, and you can build it however your team needs, from full cloth to heavy plate. What makes it different from the Carioncaller is that it's ranged, applies stronger debuffs, and puts out way more team-wide pressure. Where the Carioncaller has to get up close to apply bleeds, can only pierce one target, and reduces healing by a set amount, the Rotcaller does it all from a distance, hits multiple targets in one shot, and completely shuts down healing across the entire enemy team. It's easy to pick up, with the only real challenge being using your abilities at the right time. Unlike the Carioncaller, the Rotcaller's cooldowns are longer, so missing or hitting the wrong target is way more punishing. Still, it's a high impact build that piles on debuffs and damage just through constant pressure, even in plate armor. If you want a ranged version of the Carioncaller that's versatile, adaptive, and fits into any team comp, then the Rotcaller should be at the top of your list. Now let's go over some healer builds, the unmissable backbone of the strongest teams inside the depths. Starting with the top pick, the Holy Staff. This is by far the most popular healing weapon for this content. As a healer, your main job is to keep your party alive, but with that responsibility, you also become the primary target, so keeping yourself alive is even more crucial. Healing is a high pressure role. You need to be able to handle the stress. The right weapon, gear, and consumables all help with that. And while plenty of healing weapons are viable, the Holy Staff stands out because its unique ability is instant cast, it builds a stacking healing buff, and it does even more healing the lower your target's HP is. All of which makes your job a bit easier under pressure. Healing's never easy, but it's a crucial role and almost always necessary unless you're running a very specific comp. So if you play well under pressure and want to be the hidden carry that keeps your team going, this is the build to pick up. Now let's go over the second healer build for the depths. This one's for players who like clutch moments and big game-saving plays, the Lifetouch staff. Unlike the Holy Staff, which stacks up healing over time and ramps up the lower your teammates get, the Lifetouch is all about landing massive burst heals at the perfect moment. Its unique ability can completely turn a fight by instantly topping someone off right when they're about to drop. With that power comes with a trade-off. The Lifetouch's unique ability has a shorter range, so your positioning matters way more. You often have to step forward or dance around the edge of fights to make sure you're in range for that critical heal, which means you'll want teammates who can peel for you when things get spicy. It also changes how you play mentally. Instead of constantly spamming small heals, you're watching health bars and waiting for the exact right time to dump a huge heal and bail your team out. That can actually make long fights feel less stressful, but it demands sharp awareness and quick reactions. It's definitely harder to play than the Holy Staff, with a much higher skill ceiling, but it's also way more impactful when you get it right. So if you like being the player who swings entire fights by dropping a massive heal right when your teammate's about to get executed, the Lifetouch is the build you'll want to run. So that covers the quick overview of my top 10 builds for the depths, but we're only getting started. Now I'm going to go through each one in detail. If you're finding this helpful so far, Make sure to drop a like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton and lets me keep making more Albion content like this. Alright, let's get into it. Now I'll show you the exact gear in-game, break down the abilities, when I'd swap things around, what kind of comps each build works best in, and just explain it all like I would to a friend. Alright, let's start with the first loadout, the first build, Heron Spear. This is quickly what the loadout looks like. You have the first Q, lunging strike, the impaler on your W, and the auto attack speed passive. On the helmet of valor, you take the toughness passive. On the soldier armor, you take the toughness passive as well. This one doesn't matter, it's just for PvE. And on the cleric sandals, you want to take the aggression passive. You take the leering cane with the Heron Spear build, the Tedford cape, energy pots, and eels too. Now let's go over the abilities. So the lunging strike does a bunch of things. It does damage, it slows your target's hit, and it gives you a buff. The Spirit Spear charges. Looks like this. It's a stab in front of you, and you want to use this as much as possible throughout your auto attacks. As you can see, when I hit targets with it, I get spears around me. That's the indication of how many stacks of the buff I have. When I do a normal auto attack, I do 58 damage. When I get 3 stacks, I suddenly do 106 damage, which is almost double. So the Heron Spear does crazy damage with its auto attacks, so make sure you use the Q as much as possible to keep those stacks up. Then you have the Impaler on your W, which has quite some range to it, as you can see. It does quite a bit of damage, and it also slows the targets hit by it. So you can use this both offensively to lock someone down, or you can use it defensively in your backline to peel for your teammates. Then we have the unique ability Spear Throw on the Heron Spear, which does a lot of damage, and it stuns everyone that gets hit by it. You need to hit one target with it, and when you do, both the target you hit and everyone around them get affected by both stun and receive damage. So it's a great opener, the Spear Throw, to set things up at the start of the fight. But you can also use it defensively in your backline to peel for your team. Then you take the auto attack speed buff as the passive on the Heron Spear. You know, the auto attacks are just super important. You get a lot of damage with the charges. So this really helps get in more single target damage, which makes for a lot of pressure, especially on squishy targets, on primary targets like healer. On the weapon, you could take Forest of Spears instead of Impaler, which makes for even more damage, but it has a higher cooldown. And it's also a channel ability, which means it can get interrupted. When you hit your E, for example, and you follow up with your W, with the Forest of Spears, you do a lot of damage. Still, I do like the Impaler more, especially in extended fights. Q, passive, I wouldn't change it. Then we have the Helmet of Valor, which once again is an ability that can be used defensively or offensively. It's a smoke, a pretty big AoE that can hit multiple targets, which removes crowd control and debuffs on allies, including yourself. And on enemies, it purges their active buffs. So it's a really important ability you need to use wisely, defensively or offensively, based on the situation. But most of the time, as you'll be sticking to the healer with your strong auto attacks, they will try to use defenses, and you can get rid of their defenses with this purge. They proc something like a cleric rope, which makes them immune for 3 seconds to damage. You can just instantly get rid of it with the purifying smoke. You take the toughness passive on the helm. On the armor, you take the toughness passive as well. If you play the Heron Spear with something like a Badon, you will be the only frontliner, so having that extra defense is really helpful. Now onto the soldier armor, which has the furry ability as a buff. It looks like this when you use it. It's a red aura around you. And what it does is it stacks up to 8 times, and each stack provides extra damage and crowd control effects. Now you have a lot of damage and crowd control effects on this weapon, so having this buff at max stacks will make for an immense stun, which will completely lock down enemy teams. So when you approach a fight and you are coming from range, let's say those are our enemies, you don't want to use Fury right away because it stacks when people hit you. So you can just open with your E and then walk into them, start fighting a little, start pressuring a little. And once your Heron Spear has like 4 or 5 seconds remaining, then you can start using your armor and keep fighting. And once it's at a decent stack, I obviously can't build it up right now because I have no one hitting me. But once it has like 5, 6, 7, 8 stacks, you can use your E again the second time and do an immense long stun. Like I said before, this passive doesn't matter. It's for PvE only, so pick whichever you want. Then we have the Cleric Sandals, which makes for energetic sprint. And you take the aggression passive for this for more damage. The energetic sprint, it increases your movement speed for a few seconds, and it also makes for energy restoration, so it's an energy source. This build is very energy hungry. If I use my abilities like this, you see I already lose about 50% of my energy. So in extended fights, I definitely need energy sustain. And that's what this ability makes for. Now this ability, Energetic Sprint, is on all of the cloth sandals. However, the reason I take the Cleric Sandals specifically is because it has Blink as its unique ability. This is a teleport ability that provides immunity to damage and purges as well for a very tiny window. Looks like this. And the reason you sometimes might want to swap to Blink instead of Energetic Sprint is when you are up against teams with heavy crowd control that lock you down, especially against one-shot teams. That's why I take the Cleric Sandals. The Heron Spear is a very strong weapon, and surprisingly, it is one-handed, so you can take an offhand with it. And I think the Leering Cane is an excellent pick. Increases your CC duration, your crowd control effects, and it also lowers your cooldowns, which is ideal on a build like this that has a lot of CC, a lot of damage, and a lot of utility that can be used both offensively and defensively. For the cape, I take the Thetford cape. It has a chain lightning effect that does additional damage on your auto attacks, and you are playing a build that relies on auto attacks, so having this proc passively is excellent, especially because it is on a low cooldown. It looks like this. As you can see, it's a lightning that damages everyone around your target. Since I want to have more energy sustain, I can't rely on the energetic sprint alone. I take the energy pots with me for instant energy the moment I need it. And then you have the eels too, which makes for a combination of increased damage and lower cooldowns. This is the core build that I use inside the depths, and then I have possible swaps as well. Starting with the helmets, you can go for either Mercenary Hood or Stalker Hood. The Stalker Hood is a super strong pick. So what it does is it increases your damage for a few seconds. It makes for an offensive buff. But more importantly, it reduces the resistances of enemies as long as they are below 50% health when you use it. It looks like this. And when you get that pierce going, when you use it, when your targets are below 50% health, even plate users become super squishy. They become equal to cloth wielders. So it's a very, very strong debuff that makes enemies very vulnerable against damage. So pick this one if you don't need to have a purge in your team, if someone else has the purge covered already. Then you have the Mercenary Hood. This has the Howl ability, which does a bunch of things. It does damage, it slows your enemies, and it decreases their damage dealt as well. As if that wasn't enough, it also interrupts enemy spell casting. Looks like this, and it's an ability that can be used both offensively or defensively. You can also peel for your team with it, since it makes for huge debuffs. Now the interrupt is very important, because as a Heron Spear, you'll be applying a lot of pressure on their squishy targets, like the squishy cloth wielders, just mages, ranged DPS, healers especially. You'll be on them constantly, and when they are low and they try to get that final heal in to top themselves up, you can interrupt it with the Howl ability, which is just super strong. Both the Mercenary Hood and the Stalker Hood have cleanse on them, so that makes both of these helmets extra useful. If you don't have a cleanse in your team and you are up against a team with a lot of crowd control, you can just swap to cleanse on either of these helmets. But typically, you just want to go with the Helmet of Valor. The armor doesn't have swaps. This armor, the soldier armor, is made for the Heron Spear, so there are no armor swap options. The boot, however, does have a swap option, and it's the Stalker Shoes. Let's equip it real quick. It also has a sprint, but this one doesn't restore energy. What it does instead is it lowers your cooldowns. So if you want to emphasize the utility and pressure you have, you can go for the Stalker Shoes instead, if you don't need that extra energy sustain. The reason I take the Stalker Shoes over any other leather shoes is because this one has Raging Blink. It's a double blink instead of a single blink. It has a shorter range though, but it has an additional perk, which is that it also increases your damage for a few seconds. If you don't need to use it twice, just use it once and you will have lower cooldowns, so you'll be able to use it quicker. Now let's go over possible offhand swaps. You can go for the Musak. It is a viable option if you want to lean more on the offensive capabilities of this build. However, keep in mind, this one does increase your energy cost for all of your abilities, so you will become even more energy hungry. Personally, I really like to play it more utility and crowd control and pressure, so the Lyrian Cane does an excellent job at that, but you could go for the Musak if you want more offensive capabilities. Now you can swap your cape out for a Limhurst cape, which makes for passive energy restoration. It's a passive energy source, and when you do, you don't need the energy pot any longer, which means you can use one of the other pots in the game. And good options for the Heron Spear when you take a Limhurst cape are the Resistance pot, which increases your defenses and crowd control resistances, which allows you, to take more damage for multiple seconds. It's 6 seconds long, which is pretty long, and it allows you to stay in the backline of the enemy for longer. You could also go for the Hellfire pot, which makes for damage, but more importantly, healing received reduction. So it's a really huge debuff. You stick on the healer and you get him below 50% health, you can pop the Hellfire pot and just make it very difficult to top themselves up. You can also go for the Sticky pot, although I prefer one of the other two more when you take the Limhurst cape. But it is an extra utility that slows enemies and increases the damage they do. So you can use it in your backline like this and help your healer or other teammates out by nerfing the enemy. As for food options, you could go for beef stew for damage only, but personally, I just think the eel stew is really strong. The Heron Spear fits in pretty much any team comp. I only have 1 minute left, so let's do this quick. It fits into pretty much any team comp. You are the frontliner, you make for a lot of utility and CC, so you can play it with pretty much anything, as long as you have like a healer in the third slot. So something like a bow, mage, another melee all work well. So yeah, that pretty much covers the Heron Spear build. If you have any questions about it, ask in the comments below or join the Discord and ask them there. And if you liked this build overview, make sure to like this video and consider subscribing for more Albion content. Up next, we have the Bow of Badon. A quick overview of the build looks like this. We have the Deadly Shot for RQ, Ray of Light on the W, and the Energetic passive. On the Cowl of Purity, you take the Aggression passive, On the Phase Scale Rope, you take the Aggression passive as well. And on the Stalker Shoes, you go for the Balanced Mind. Then you have the Thetford Cape, Resistance Pots, and Beef Stew. Now let's go over the abilities, starting with the bow. On the bow, you take Deadly Shot, which looks like this. It damages all targets it goes through, and not only does it do damage, but it also reduces their resistances, which is a debuff that stacks up to 3 times. So you want to hit your Q as much as possible. Then on the W, you have Ray of Light, which roots enemies and also does quite some damage. It has quite some range on it, so it's great to keep people away from you or lock them down to combine with your unique ability, Raging Storm. Raging Storm does a lot of things. It does damage when you hit it, but also when people leave the area, it keeps on doing damage for a couple seconds. And whilst the debuff ticks, it also interrupts enemy spell casting, which is huge. It's a huge interrupt. I must say though, it's a difficult ability to hit. You need to be as accurate as possible. And since it has a 30-second cooldown, it's very punishing if you miss it. As you saw, the AoE is pretty big, so it's a very strong ability. Ideal to hit as many targets with it, but sometimes it's just great to pop it on the healer, so they cannot cost their heals for quite a bit. Like I said, you can combine it with your W, Ray of Light, to keep people in place and do as much damage as possible. So you would first debuff them with your Q, and then once you have the debuff going, you just W and E back to back, which does for maximum damage. Now on your passive you have Energetic, because you don't have any other energy source in your build. So you want to auto attack in between your Qs as much as possible. Not only do you do a lot more damage per second when you auto, but you also keep your energy up like that. Keep your energy sustained. Very important to auto attack with any build, even more so with the Bow of Badon. Let's go over the cape first, because it adds on to the importance of the auto attacks. The Thetford Cape, it releases a chain lightning that does damage to your target and everyone around them, up to 4 targets, but since the depth is 3v3, and if they are stacked like this and you do an auto, you hit all 3 of them just like this. It has a low cooldown, so 15 seconds. So keep on hitting those autos. Even more important with this cape. Then we have the armor pieces, starting with the Cowl of Purity. On this one, you take the Avalonian Beam and you take the Aggression passive for extra damage. The Avalonian Beam is the unique ability of the Cowl of Purity. It looks like this. It's a beam, like it says. It does damage right away, and it also does damage over time, and it makes for an additional interrupt. So you have a total of 2 interrupt possibilities with this build. If you see the healer is very low and they try to get that last heal in, but you're not in range for the Raging Storm, you can just use the Avalonian Beam instead to interrupt them. Then you have your armor piece, the Phase Scale Rope. When you use it, it channels through 3 different abilities. All 3 of these are fireable. However, you are clot, you don't have any defenses, so most of the time you'll want to use this one, the fire. When people interact with it or when people get hit by it, they flee, they get feared. The other strong option as a defensive is the Storm Shield, which is the second one. Not only does it increase your resistances, but it also stuns enemies when they attack you and they receive a tiny bit of damage. And just to showcase you what it looks like this. You get this aura around you, this shield around you, which is very viable as well. Depending on the situation, you can use either Ring of Fire or Storm Shield. And then you have the Frozen Fragments as the third one, which is an offensive one. You won't be using that one often, honestly. More of a finisher when you already wiped 2 out of 3 people, and then you need that extra DPS to finish the third person off. But otherwise, always defensive on this squishy build. Then for your boot slot, you have the Stalker Shoes. The Stalker Shoes comes with Raging Blink, which looks like this, and you can use it twice back to back. When you use it twice, the cooldown is increased by 5 seconds. So if you only need to use it once, and that's plenty to keep your distance, then just limit yourself and save yourself the higher cooldown. Aside from the blink, it also increases your damage. You can use it offensively, but keep in mind it's your only form of mobility, so you probably want to use it defensively most of the time. Already went over the cape, so let's go over the consumables next. You are a clot user, you are squishy, so to help you with that, I use the resistance pot in this build. Increases your defenses by almost 50% for 6 seconds, and also increases your crowd control resistances. 6 seconds is a huge time, so make sure to pop this when people start doing heavy damage on you. Then you have the eel stew as your consumable, your food option. It increases your damage and it also increases your cooldown rates. It's a sweet balance of the stats it provides. And that pretty much covers the core build. The only thing I didn't go over is the boot swap or the ability swap on the boot. Refreshing sprint. If you want, if you don't need a blink, if you don't want a blink, you can just go for refreshing sprint instead, which will make for a sprint that not only increases your movement speed, but also reduces your overall cooldowns. Then we have the possible item swaps for this build, starting with the Guardian Helmet. If you want a more defensive build, since you are very squishy, you can go for the Guardian Helmet on the Bow of Badon, which makes for the emergency shield. Looks like this, gives you a shield, and also allies close to you benefit from that shield. And the only thing you need to know about it is that once you are below 40% health, the shield is way bigger. But it is a mistake to hold on to this shield until you are below 40% health, because most of the time fights are extended and you can get it off multiple times. So once someone is on you, you could just pop the shield straight away and use the shield more throughout the fight. Also, if you go for the Guardian Helmet, go for the Toughness passive for higher defenses. For your boot swap, you can go with the Royal Sandals. You are in need of more energy sustain. You could go with any of the cloth sandals for the energetic sprint. But this one also has the Defenseless Rush ability, which increases your movement speed and damage for a few seconds. But it does decrease your defenses, making you more vulnerable. Be careful of that. But there is a big advantage to this ability over other sprints, which is that it's a channel, so it cannot be purged. People cannot get rid of the Defenseless Rush once you proc it. Then we have a possible cape swap. You could go for the Carleon cape instead of the Thetford cape, where the Thetford cape activates on auto attacks and makes for more AoE damage. What the Carleon cape does is it resets your Q immediately. So when you use it, it's immediately reset. You can use it twice back to back and apply that debuff and then follow up with your W and E after 2 stacks straight away, making for a lot of damage and pressure in an instant. That third cape has only 15 seconds cooldown. This one has 30 seconds cooldown. It's completely up to you which one you want to use, but the Thetford cape has been proven to be very effective. Possible food swap is the beef stew. This one provides full damage, so if you want to emphasize the damage this build has, you can take a beef stew instead of the eel stew. Very, very strong, valid option. And then for the pot swap, you can go for the sticky pot. It is a bit more of a high skill ceiling item, I would say, compared to the resi pot. Especially if you are starting out, just go with the resi pot instead. But if you are a bit more experienced, you could go for the sticky pot, which you can throw in the backline to help yourself and the healer out. This one basically slows enemies and it reduces the damage they do. So it's a huge debuff, a huge utility item that can be used defensively. Now the Bow of Badon fits in a lot of team comps, but you ideally want to have a healer next to you and you want to have a bruiser, a sturdy frontliner as the third person. Because you want something that can peel for you and that can set things up. So something like the previous build, the Heron Spear, would make for an ideal partner, as it's a frontliner that can lock people with their stun, which allows you to debuff them and follow up with your combo as well. I hope I helped you with this build overview. If you found it helpful, make sure to give this video a like. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments, join the community on Discord, and we'll do our best to help you there as well. And if you want more Albion content in general, make sure to subscribe. On to the third build, the Hellspawn staff, also known as Imp. Quickly going over the build loadout, it looks like this. You take these abilities on it, the fourth ability on the Q, second ability on the W, and the fourth passive. On the helm, the Royal Helmet, you want the Ballista support fire and the toughness passive. Soldier armor with Fury, toughness, and any of these passives work. It's only for PvE, not for PvP. And then the Cleric sandals, where you take the energetic sprint. Or you can swap to blink. Oh wait, I'm not supposed to get into the swaps yet. You take the energetic sprint with the aggression passive. Then you have the Carioncaller cape, you have resistance pots, and you have beef stew. So that is the standard loadout. As you can see from my inventory, I don't really have swaps with this build, and that's because the gear is pretty much hard locked, and so are the abilities. Starting with the Hellspawn staff, or maybe I should talk about how you play this build first, because it is super complicated. It's the single most mechanically challenging build in the game. You basically have damage and debuff on your Q, which you want to spam as much as possible. Because of the Carioncaller cape, you can use it back to back every 30 seconds, but it looks like this. So this does damage and it reduces the enemy resistances. On your second ability, you have a pull. Pull people to you, and you root them at the same time, or root them once you have them pulled. So you want to use your Q and then stack it up and then pull people to you. Now here is where things get complicated. On your E, you have a transformation, so you change into the Imp. Now keep in mind, once you change into the Imp, you become very, very vulnerable, as your defenses are very low. You are very squishy at this point. But it does give you access to two huge abilities. Starting with the Q. Let me get some charges first. So the Q ability also gives you charges. As you can see, I just got 2. If I hit a single target, I only get 1. But since I hit 2 people here, or 2 dummies, I get 2 stacks at once. But you need these when you transform. So when you use your Q, you summon this ball, and when you use it again, you teleport to it, and it explodes, making for even more damage. So if you only use it once, you don't teleport to it, and the damage is less. If you use it whenever you want, as long as it's active, you can teleport to it and make it explode. It's a huge AoE, and a huge burst as well. Now the Hellfire Barrage, the second ability of the transformation, looks like this. It's a channeled ability that does a lot of damage when it's fully channeled. So it's really good to burst a single target down. Those are the 2 abilities you have access to when you are in the Imp mode, the Hellfire Imp mode. But you also have a passive, this one, Melting Point. Every 3 auto attacks, when you are in the Imp form, you create a lava under the target, like this. And it does even more damage. So your auto attacks are very important as well in the Imp form. As for the passive on the weapon itself, not the transformation passive, but this one, Rule Bender, after casting your W in human form, your auto attack speed and cast speed increases, which helps with the passive of the Imp form. Let's go over the abilities and then let's go over the full combo. You have the soldier armor on this build, which makes for Fury, which makes for a stacking debuff. As long as people hit you, it stacks up to 8 times. And when fully stacked, you do a ton more damage and your crowd controls are increased as well in their effects. So it's a very important buff but it can be purged, so be careful with that. You are vulnerable to purges, so use it wisely and use it once you start taking damage. Don't use it and then start walking up to the enemy, you know, because you'll waste a lot of vulnerable time. Only use it once you are in the battle itself already, where people already are doing damage, then start using it. The boots, you're looking at cleric sandals, where you can take any sandals. I personally like the cleric sandals a lot because they provide both energetic sprint, which makes for a sprint that also restores energy, as well as blink, which is super handy to have against one-shot comps. So you can swap to the blink whenever you need to, but otherwise you can also take any of the other cloth sandals in the game. As for the passives on these items, toughness for increased defenses, same on the soldier armor, and on the boots you want aggression for more damage. Then you have the resistance pot, which increases your defenses. Important to know about the pots and the usage of them with this build is that once you are in imp form, you cannot use your consumables. So you need to use your consumables before you turn into the imp mode. And we use the beef stew for more damage. This build has a ton of damage. Since I don't have much swaps, I'll quickly go over that. You can go for eel stew instead of beef stew for both damage and cooldown reduction. Although personally I prefer the meat stew more because it makes for far more damage. And for your pot, now you are a frontliner, you are in heavy armor, and especially if you are the only frontliner, Resi pot is just super good to have. But if you play with another frontliner, another bruiser, or you are super skilled, you could also go for the Hellfire Potion, which is a huge debuff. It reduces healing received by 50% to anyone who stands in the puddle, so you could go for that one as well. But I would really recommend going with the Resi pot instead. But these are pretty much the only consumable swaps you have in this build. Now for the full combo, it's mechanically challenging AF, like I said before. But what you basically want to do is you want to start off with some Qs, right? You want to do some damage. You want to reduce their resistances. Once you have the opportunity, you want to use your armor. And when people attack you, you'll build up these stacks that increase your damage and your CC. And you want to keep the Qs up whilst doing that. And once you are in a good position, you want to drag people to you with your W, immediately use your stun after you drag them, so they are locked in place. And at this point, you are going to swap to the imp form, use your Q, burst them heavily, and then immediately on the priority target, which will be the healer most of the time, you want to spam your W. And after that, you even want to keep auto-attacking to pop this puddle. So it's a huge rotation. It's very difficult to pull off properly in PvP, but once you get the hang of it, it's super rewarding. I'll show you the rotation once more in its full speed and everything. So what you want to do is you want to get Q stacks, you want to pop your armor, you want to pull people in, immediately stun them, change to imp, Q, and W. And then after W, you want to keep auto-attacking in imp form, pop the puddle and go back and just spam those Qs again and wait for your rotation. Now, since your Furry ability and Helm stun have higher cooldown, you could use a root in between if you really need to, but make sure your root is up again by the time Furry and Ballista support fire are off cooldown again, so you can use your combo properly. Now the imp is a tanky frontliner. It uses the soldier armor. It is vulnerable when it's in imp form, but that's more of a skill issue. So you could play anything with this, honestly. Something that's really strong with it would be something like the Rotcaller, which makes for fully negated healing, so people cannot heal up. Makes for a lot of pressure. You could play a bruiser next to it. You could play a tank next to it. You can play a squishy DPS next to it. Anything works, really. So it's completely up to you. You are the frontliner, so pick whatever you want. And I would definitely recommend having a healer as the third slot. If you have any questions about the imp build, feel free to ask them in the comments below or join the Discord community and ask them there, and we will make sure to help you out. If this build overview had value for you, make sure to like this video. And if you want more Albion Online content, make sure to subscribe as well. On to the next build, we have the Forgehammers. Let's have a quick look at the loadout. On the Forgehammers, you want to take the powerful swing on your Q, slowing charge on your W, and be on the stunning strike passive on your weapon. On your helm, you want to have the quick tinker passive. On your jacket, you want to have the same passive once more. And on your sandals, you want the energetic sprint together with the aggression passive for more damage. You use this with the Limhurst cape for energy sustain, the resistance pot, and an eel stew. Now let's go over each of these abilities individually, starting with the weapon and the powerful swing on your Q. When you use this ability, it looks like this. You step in and you swing your hammer and you do some damage, and you also interrupt people because it has a knockback to it. So it's a huge interrupt on a very low cooldown. You basically want to be spamming this ability. Then on the W, you have slowing charge, which is a massive mobility plus slow. So people cannot get away from you. You have so much mobility in this build, so much CC, they simply cannot get away from you. And then you have the unique ability of the Forgehammers Giant Steps, which has a lot going on for it, starting with a huge buff. It increases your armor and your magic resistance, and even your auto attack range when you pop this ability. You also have an aura around you, which slows people in it. This is what it looks like. And when you activate this ability, you also get access to Giant Smash, which is on a low cooldown, which does a lot of damage and also interrupts people once more because it knocks them up. So this ability has a lot going on for it. It's a very strong ability, and it allows you to use a build like this where you are in leather armor and are still considered a frontline that can dive the enemy healer and the enemy backline. Now on the weapon, you want to have the Stunning Strike passive, which makes for a mini stun every 5 auto attacks, which just adds to the crowd control, interrupt, chaos, pressure, whatever you want to call it, of this build. Then we have the Assassin Hood with the meditation ability. If you use your E and you are fighting inside the enemy team and your buff is about to run out, it does last very long, as you can see. Now it's on 19, 18, 17, and you just pop the Assassin Hood and it should be back up again very soon. The Assassin Hood basically reduces the cooldowns of all your abilities while you are channeling this, and it's about a 15-second cooldown on all of your abilities if you get it channeled fully, because it can be interrupted. So it is vulnerable, so do not use it around crowd control of the enemy. The Quick Tinker passive, because you want lower cooldowns on this build. Same for the armor, Quick Tinker passive once again. And on the armor you have the electric field, which looks like this and does a ton of damage to everyone around you. Since you are slowing people with your W, with your E, you interrupt them continuously, it's very easy to get that Stalker jacket off and fully dump the damage on whoever you have your eyes set to. On the boots, I like to take Cultist Sandals because it has energetic sprint. Any of the cloth sandals work really, so it's up to you. Occasionally, you may want to swap to Rotten Ground, which is why I take the Cultist Sandals, which doesn't have that much of a movement speed buff, so it leaves you with less mobility, but it comes with huge debuffs. It reduces the enemy resistances, making them more vulnerable, and it also reduces the healing they receive for a few seconds. Although this number isn't that high, it's only 20%, it can still make a huge difference. It looks like this, and anyone that you step over basically gets affected by this debuff. For the passive, you want to take Aggression for more damage. Standard, I go on Energetic Sprint. Alright, we got the armors covered. Now let's go over the cape. This build does spam its abilities a lot, so you are very energy hungry. So what you want to do is you want to have a solid source of energy sustain, which is what the Limhurst cape is for. You will be playing in the enemy backline most of the time. You'll be focusing their healer, their squishies. So for that reason, you want to go with resistance pots so you can stay in the enemy backline for longer and you can pop it whenever they decide to hard focus you. It increases your defenses and it increases your crowd control resistances. Especially when you don't have your E up, you become more vulnerable. For food, I like to go with eel stew as it increases both your damage and your cooldowns, which are both stats that this build benefits heavily from. Now let's go over some possible item swaps, starting with your hood. It's always good to have a purge in your team, because if you dive the enemy healer and they start using their defensive buffs, you need a way to get rid of them. And the Helmet of Valor does exactly that with its Purifying Smoke. It's an ability that can be used offensively and defensively, as the Purifying Smoke also cleanses all crowd control and debuffs from you and your party members. Another helmet option is the Mercenary Hood, which comes with the Howl ability. This one makes for a tiny bit of damage, but more importantly, makes for a lot of crowd control in the form of a slow and a huge interrupt. It even has a debuff to it where the damage the enemy deals is reduced by 30% for a few seconds, which are all nice things to have. It slows the enemy as well, since you are someone that wants to stick to other players. Having an extra slow is very helpful as well, but the most important thing about this ability is the interrupt. Whenever you use it, you instantly interrupt whatever someone is casting. So if a healer is below 50% health, and they try to top themselves up, and you are about to one-shot them, you can just interrupt their efforts for their final top-up. For armor, you can change to the soldier armor, because this build, it's already so strong with all the abilities it has. By changing to the soldier armor, you become even more tanky, and you also get damage through the furry ability. So it's more of a playstyle preference you have. And a possible boot swap is changing to any of the leather shoes. Doesn't matter which one, all of them have the refreshing sprint, which lowers your cooldowns. When you do go for a leather shoe, go for the quick tinker passive, so it affects your cooldowns even more. A possible cape swap is the Carioncaller cape. What the Carioncaller cape does is it allows you to use your Q ability twice back to back every 30 seconds. Makes for more damage and more interrupts. If you do that change though, make sure you have energetic selected on your weapon instead of stunning strike, because you do need energy sustain. So this passive can help you with that. As for consumable swaps, I do think the Resi pot is very good, but if you play with something like the soldier armor, which is tankier by default, you can go for a more offensive pot such as the Hellfire pot, which does a bit more damage and reduces healing received of the enemy targets. So it really adds to that pressure this build is all about. You could also go for the Sticky pot, which slows enemies and reduces their damage, which you can both use offensively and defensively to peel for your team. As for where the Forgehammer fits in comps, it is a very sturdy, tanky frontliner that can, play in the enemy backline and stay there for very long. So you can pair it with pretty much anything you want to. And even what I said in the overview, having 2 Forgehammers is a solid option as well. It's just super strong. You could have one of the standard builds I just showed you and have the second Forgehammer on something like this. That's a very, very possible team comp. Otherwise, you can go with a mage, you can go with an archer, with something that negates enemy healing, such as the Carioncaller or the Rotcaller. It's very viable with a lot of stuff. You could even go crazy and do like 3 Forgehammers. I really wonder how that would be. But I've seen Forgehammers single-handedly carry teams, so it is a very strong build that fits into any team comp. If you have any questions about this build, you can ask them in the comments below or join the community Discord and I can help you out there as well. If you like this build, please give the video a like. And if you want more Albion Online content like this, make sure to subscribe. Now let's go over the carving sword build. Starting with a quick look at the loadout. We have the carving sword with the first Q, first W, and the first passive. On the helm, you want to take the toughness passive. On the robe of purity, you want to take the aggression passive. And on the sandals, you want to take the aggression passive once again. You have the Tetford cape with it, resistance pots, and eel stew for your food. Now let's dive into the build and the abilities. So starting with your weapon, you want to take the first Q, Heroic Strike, which does damage. It's on a low cooldown, it's an ability you want to spam. And aside from doing damage, it increases your movement speed, and it gives you a buff named Heroic Charge, which increases your auto attack speed on top of that. So it looks like this. When you have someone targeted and you use your Q, you jump towards the target. And you pretty much want to use this on one of these squishies, most likely the healer, and just get rid of that person ASAP. You get those swords flying around you, floating around you, which indicates how many stacks of the buff you have. And when you have 3, you have 36% increase to your auto attack speed. So once again, we're looking at a build where auto attacks are super important. And as you can see, the auto attacks do a lot of damage. You also use the Tetford cape in this build, which is the Chain Lightning we've seen in other builds as well. It's a low cooldown ability that makes for an extra AoE on your auto attacks. It looks like this. And since in the depths people tend to stick together, you'll most likely proc it on 2 or 3 people most of the time. And then you have the Deep Cuts passive on your auto attacks as well, which makes for a bleed every 4 auto attacks. So you have a lot of reasons to auto attack with this build. So you do heavy damage, you proc your cape, you proc the bleed, and because of the buff you receive, you do faster auto attacks on top of that, which scales with all the bonuses you have in this build. So spam your Qs and make sure spam your auto attacks in between. I emphasize this because it's just super important on this build specifically. Now on your W, you have Blade Cyclone. It does damage and it makes for mobility. And you want to have at least 1 Heroic Charge active so that it consumes it and does even more damage. So you can engage with like a Q followed up by an instant W, start off very strong within the first second of the fight. On your E, you have the Fearless Strike, which once again makes for damage and mobility. It looks like this. And aside from damage and mobility, it also decreases the enemy resistances, so it's a huge pierce. The amount of the pierce depends on how many stacks of Heroic Charge you have. And I will say, you don't have to always use this, like you don't have to wait for 3 stacks first before you use it. You know, because it does have a pretty low cooldown at only 20 seconds. So you could just use it as soon as you have 1 or 2 stacks and just get that initial pierce. And with that, the initial pressure going as soon as the fight starts. So now, since you have so much mobility, it's very difficult for people to get away from you. So you can close the gap, you can, you know, chase people down very easily with the carving sword. So let's go over the armor pieces now. Starting with the Robe of Purity, I feel is a good idea on this build. You are using cloth armor, so you are very squishy, but cloth armor also makes for the highest offensive bonuses. So you'll be super strong, but you will be squishy, which is something to really keep in mind with the carving sword, as you will place yourself in the enemy backline because you have to prioritize those healers, those squishy targets. The Robe of Purity, what it does is it gives you a shield around you, a bubble, which knocks people back. Looks like this, and when you hit the targets, you knock them back. And you can knock them back multiple times in a row, and you can really isolate a target with it. Aside from the CC it comes with, it also does a bit of damage, and it gives you a buff in the form of immunity against forced movement effects. A lot of healers will run this exact same rope in the depths as well. So you kind of counter them with the same rope because their knockbacks won't work on you any longer. Now, if they have other defenses, you can purge it with the Helmet of Valor. The Helmet of Valor comes with the Purifying Smoke, which looks like this. It has quite some range to it. And this gets rid of all enemy buffs. So if they have a Cleric Robe, they pop that immunity shield and they won't receive any damage for 3 seconds. If you are quick, you can instantly get rid of it with your helmet. Also, you can use this defensively to cleanse yourself from crowd controls and other negative effects. On the helm, you take the Toughness passive for increased defenses, and on the rope, you take the Aggression passive for increased damage. Then you have the shoes, the Cultist Sandals, for Energetic Sprint, increases your movement speed and restores energy. It's your only energy source in this build, so you want to have a form of energy sustain. It doesn't require that much energy, this build, which is very surprising if you ask me personally. So the energy sustain from the boots will be plenty. You could take any of the cloth sandals for the energy sprint, so take whichever you want. You want to have the aggression passive on it for increased damage. The reason I take cultist sandals specifically is because you can swap to the rotten ground ability on it, which makes for a very nasty debuff. It adds to the amounts of pierces you have, because when you use the rotten ground, people have their damage resistances reduced even further. And it also reduces healing received by 20%, which doesn't sound like much, but it's definitely an amount that can make a difference. Now you can use the rotten ground, and it looks like this, and you can actually combine it together with your E for maximum pierce. But keep in mind, when you have rotten ground instead of energetic sprint, you don't have an energy source any longer, so sustaining your energy will become far more difficult. And also, the rotten ground has far less movement speed to it. But it's a very strong ability, which is why the cultist sandals are ideal for this build. Then for the pot, you want to be on the resistance pot, because you are super squishy and you are going to play in the enemy backline. So you need the increased defenses and crowd control resistance the Resi pot makes for, and it lasts pretty long at 6 seconds. For food, the eel stew is ideal as it increases both your damage and your cooldowns get lowered. So all of the damage gets increased even further. And you might think, why not the beef stew? Well, that's because although the beef stew increases your damage even more, this build isn't only about damage. It really is about all the mobility and utility you have on it as well. So having lower cooldowns really helps with that. Therefore, I would say just stick to the eel stew. If for whatever reason you want to go with the beef stew instead, you can do that as well. Now that we covered the core build, let's go over possible swaps. You really want to have a purge on this build. So the only possible swap for your helm is the Fiend Cowl. The Fiend Cowl has a purge just like the Helmet of Valor, but it works differently. Instead of having the Helmet of Valor where you need to aim it and hit someone with it, which they could possibly dodge, you know, by using a blink, for example, or run out of it, the Fiend Cowl follows your target. And it's from a pretty far range as well. It looks like this. And just like the Helmet of Valor, it completely purges whatever target you selected, and it removes all buffs. But this one is solo target, single target. So the Helmet of Valor, where it can remove buffs from multiple people and even cleanse yourself at the same time. This one is individual. So this one is really good if you have difficulties hitting your Helmet of Valor and you really, really want to bring that healer down. And then for the possible cape swap, you could go for the Avalonian cape instead of the Thetford cape. This one has double the cooldown at 30 seconds instead of 15. It also procs on your auto attack, does damage around you, and has an extra debuff to it where it reduces the damage of enemies by 15% for a few seconds. Looks like this. So if you want that extra debuff, you could go for the Avalonian cape instead of the Thetford cape, but I really think the Thetford cape is the best pick for this build. The carving sword fits in pretty much any team. any team benefits from having a pierce, benefits from the high mobility and damage this build makes for. However, you are on cloth, so you are squishy. So if you go together with another squishy target, your team is going to be very vulnerable. Therefore, it's really good to go with a target that's frontline as well, such as the Carioncaller. You could go with the Heron Spear, something that's sturdy, something that's tanky. The Forgehammers, you know, something that takes away the focus from you and that provides CC and setup for you. But any team would benefit from having a carving. Even something like a Bow of Badon could go very well with it, but you'll have to play super careful as you both will be squishy. Now that's the build overview for the carving sword. I hope you liked it and I hope it helps you out. If you have any questions about it, feel free to ask in the comments below, or you can join the Discord community and you can ask your questions there. And if you like this video, make sure to give it a like and feel free to subscribe for more Albion Online content just like this. Then we have the Carioncaller for the 6th build. And here is a quick look at its loadout. Hood of Tenacity with the Quick Tinker passive. The Royal Armor with the Toughness passive. This one doesn't matter, only for PvE. The Mercenary Shoes with the Quick Tinker passive once more. On the Carioncaller itself, you want to have the Rending Rage. For W, you can go with a lot of options, but I start with Deadly Chop. And then you have the Deep Cuts. I'll get into the W options later in this part. With this, you go for the Thetford Cape, you go for the Resistance Pots, and you go for the Eels too. And that's a quick look at the complete loadout. Alright, starting with the abilities on the weapon, Carioncaller, you want to go for the 3rd Q, Rending Rage, which looks like this. It's an attack in front of you, and it does damage, it applies bleed stacks, and you can use it 3 times back to back before it goes on cooldown. The 3rd one actually roots your enemies as well, so it comes with some CC as well. But for max DPS, what you want to do is use it twice and then auto attack. And then you can use it again very shortly after. So only use the root if you really have to, otherwise stick to the first 2 and just wait for it to reset. On your W, you have a lot of options. You can go for the Deadly Chop, which is a single target ability, which will do some damage, but more importantly, reduce the resistances of your enemy. So if you really want to nuke a target down, the Deadly Chop is really good to have on your W. You can go for Adrenaline Boost as well, which is a buff, only active on yourself, which increases your damage, your movement speed, and your auto attack speed, as long as you are dealing direct damage. So as you can see, I'm faster now. You can see the aura around me as well. And by auto-attacking, you reapply the buff a couple times. So that's Adrenaline Boost. And then you have Battle Rush as an option as well. This one comes with a mobility, a debuff, and a buff all at once. You basically charge. It has quite some range. You can charge to a target, and when you do, and of course you can use the charge to get away from stuff as well, so it can be used offensively or defensively. But when you charge, you will have an AoE around you that will decrease the healing received of enemies hit by it, and it will increase the healing received by allies hit by it. So once again, it's an option that you can use both offensively and defensively, or even both at once, depending on who's standing where. Those are the best 3 options for the depths, I would say. The Raging Blades is a very good ability as well, but we're more focusing on debuffs and utility here. So stick to one of these 3, with the Deadly Chop being my go-to for this build. On your weapons passive, you go with Deep Cuts for extra damage on your auto attacks. Auto attacking is always super important. You always want to auto attack for max DPS on any weapon, but especially if you have something like a passive on your weapon that makes for more damage, and you go for the Thetford Cape, which you do with this build as well, which procs every 15 seconds. Looks like this. It's lightning that deals damage to your target and everyone around them. And on this very low cooldown, combined with the deep cuts, You just want to do as many auto attacks as possible on this build. Then you have the unique ability of the Carioncaller, the Morgana Raven, which does damage, which applies a bleed, and most importantly, it reduces healing received by 40% for 4 seconds. It looks like this. It's the main reason why you want to play the Carioncaller over any other X. So this build is all about applying dots, doing damage, auto attacks, reducing resistances, and debuffing the enemies so they receive less healing. Then for the Hood, on the standard build, you want to go with the Hood of Tenacity, which makes for the Nasty Wounds debuff. Not only does this make for damage, every 0.5 seconds the enemies stay within the AoE, but as soon as they get in contact with it, their healing received and healing cost gets decreased by 50% for 4 seconds. And it looks like this. Now, this is a very nasty debuff, especially since you already have a healing received debuff on your Morgana Raven. You basically shut down healing all over the enemy team. For the passive, you want to take Quick Tinker to have lower cooldowns, and with that, higher pressure with your abilities. You go with the Royal Armor for the Energy Source ability, and you go with the Toughness ability for extra defenses. This passive doesn't matter, it's a PvE thing only. And the Energy Source, when you use it, you get an aura around you, and you provide energy not only for yourself, but also for your teammates. Which means that your teammates can go with, if they normally go with Limher's Cape for their energy sustain, they can go with a more offensive cape instead. If they have the energy passive on their weapon, they can take another passive that makes for more DPS, more debuff instead. So it's a very good buff that provides team-wide utility. And then for the boots, you go with any of the leather shoes for the refreshing sprint, which makes for mobility, and more importantly, it makes for lower cooldowns. You also want to take the Quick Tinker passive on the leather shoes for lower cooldowns. For the pot, you want to go with the Resi pot, the resistance pot, which increases your defenses and crowd control resistances for 6 seconds, which allows you to stay in the enemy backline for longer and pressure that much more. For the food, you want to go with the Eel Stew, which increases your damage and lowers your cooldowns, which pairs well with this build. Then we go for the possible swaps on this build, starting with the helmet option. You can go for the Stalker Hood. These are the correct abilities. What the Stalker Hood does is it makes for a buff that increases your damage for a few seconds, but more importantly, it makes for a huge debuff when the enemies are below 50% health and you proc it. Looks like this, and when you use it, when they are below 50%, they become super vulnerable. This resistance debuff is so nasty that plate users will even turn into clot users in an instant. So it's a very strong option on a build that has so much pressure already. Another option that's very good on this build is the Helmet of Valor, which makes for the Purifying Smoke, which can be used in different ways. It can be used offensively, it can be used defensively, and even both at the same time. What this ability does is it makes for an AoE that cleanses all crowd control and debuff effects on you and allies that get hit by it, but it also purges all buffs on the enemies, leaving them very vulnerable. Has quite some range on it, so you can use it on yourself, you can use it offensively, or in your backline defensively to help your team out. Looks like this, a very strong option as well. For your armor, you have multiple options as well with the Carioncaller. If you want to have a more offensive approach, the Soldier Armor is a very good pick. With the Fury ability, the Fury buff, stack a buff up to 8 times, which increases your damage by 9% every tick, and your crowd control effects by 5% every tick. Now, you don't really have crowd control on this buff, so you're not going to benefit much from that aspect of the buff, but the damage is huge. It's 72% when maxed out. Looks like this. Very important to recognize this aura, because it's definitely something you'll want to purge when the enemies have it. But this just makes for a ton of damage and, you know, puts you more in a DPS instead of a tank role with this build if you want to play it like that. Then the other option is the Judicator armor. And by the way, on both these armors, you also want to take toughness, just like the Royal armor. And the Judicator armor's ability, the Force Shield, is a huge AoE that makes for increased damage resistances of you and your allies, and increased healing received, as long as you guys are inside of the field, and looks like this. It's a very strong team buff, definitely a very strong pick for the Carioncaller as well. So you can pick any of these 3 armors depending on how you want to approach it. If you want to be more on the offense, the Soldier armor. If you want team-wide utility, the Royal armor, which opens up various slots in the other party members' builds. And then you have the Judicator armor, which is just a super valuable defensive buff team-wide. Now for the boots, you can also run the Cultist Sandal instead of one of the leather shoes. The Cultist Sandal makes for the energetic sprint, which makes for energy sustain, aside from mobility, but you can also go the Rotten Ground on it. The Rotten Ground is a huge debuff that reduces healing received even further, which just scales well with all the healing received you have going on already, and it also reduces enemy resistances. So it's a huge nasty debuff that just adds to the terror this build makes for. One thing to know about this ability though is that it doesn't have a huge movement speed buff on it, unlike the typical sprints, so it leaves you with less mobility. So keep that in mind if you take it. You don't have any other mobility in this build other than your boots, unless you go for Adrenaline Boost or Battle Rush on your W, so keep in mind that you are pretty immobile on this build. Then the possible cape swaps. If you have energy issues, you can always go for the Limhurst cape. Especially if you don't play the Royal armor, you'll notice that you'll quickly need more energy, so the Limhurst cape is a very viable option for that. If you want your auto attacks to do a debuff aside from damage, you can go for the Avalonian cape. It has double the cooldown of the Thetford cape at 30 seconds instead of 15. But aside from doing damage, it also reduces the enemy's damage for 4 seconds by 15%. So it's a debuff at the same time, and it looks like this. Then for your possible consumable swaps, depending on how you want to go with your build, how you want to approach the fights, I do think the Resi pot is the way to go. But if you are more confident, you could go for the Hellfire pot, which has some damage on it. More importantly, even more of that healing debuff that this build is about. So if you go for the Hellfire pot, maybe swap out your helm and go for a Helmet of Valor or Stalker Hood instead. Because otherwise you have too much of the debuff going on and you won't have anything else going on. And another viable pot is the Sticky Potion, which slows enemies and reduces their damage dealt. So if you want more of a debuff that you can use both offensively and defensively, the Sticky Pot is a very viable option as well. The Carioncaller goes with pretty much anything. It's been a staple build in competitive PvP for the longest time, so you can pair it with pretty much anything you want to. Something like a ranged DPS would work, whether it's the Bow of Badon, whether it's something like the Arctic Staff or a Fire Staff, all of those work, because you do fill the frontliner role with this, and you are in the enemy's face, so you could also take a bruiser with you, something like a Bear Paw, something like a Carving Sword. Anything works with it. It's a very versatile weapon that fits into many team comps. I would play it with a healer though for the 3rd slot, just to keep your party alive, because it doesn't really fit into those one-shot type of comps. If you want to do that, you can better go with the Rotcaller instead, which fully negates healing, whereas the Morgana Raven only reduces it by 40%. And that's it for the Carioncaller. If you have any questions about this build, ask away in the comments below or join the Discord and you can ask your questions there as well. If you found this build overview valuable, make sure to give this video a like. And if you want more Albion Online content just like this, make sure to subscribe as well. Next up on the list, we have the Arctic Staff build, which is the only mage build in this list. On the Arctic Staff, you take the 3rd Q, 3rd W, and the 4th passive. On the Cal of Purity, you take the Aggression, passive, Pay Scale Rope, the same, Aggression once more, and on the Royal Sandals as well, you take Aggression. You're full cut with this build, take the Limhurst cape, resistance pots, and beef stew. I will say this isn't a very flexible build in that you don't really want to swap anything out. You do have a couple options, but honestly, I think the build as is the strongest option by far. Starting with the abilities on the Arctic Staff, we have Frozen Surge on its Q, which does damage and slows enemies. It's an AoE with a very low cooldown, so it's an ability you'll want to spam to keep enemies away from you. You are full clot, you are very squishy, so you need anything you can to keep enemies away. So keep spamming that Q and make sure to hit it. On your W, you have Frost Nova. It does a tiny bit of damage, it has a stun to it, and even a buff in the form of immunity to damage for 0.2 seconds, which is a very tiny window. But the most important thing about it is the fact that it's mobility. It's a teleport, and it's just super handy to have a teleport on your W, especially when you are playing a squishy mage like this. If you are very skilled at the game, if you know what you are doing, you can also use this ability for the stun, but that's like next level type of gameplay. But keep in mind, it does have a stun, so you could possibly interrupt people with it as well. Then we have the unique ability Arctic Volley on the Arctic Staff, which is why we take this staff over any other frost weapon. And it looks like this. Honestly, this ability is way harder to hit than it looks, especially in PvP where people keep moving. But it's a very strong ability that does a lot of damage and even has a stacking slow on it, so even more CC. And it's also pretty low cooldown at only 15 seconds for a unique ability. The passive on this weapon is the Furious passive, where after every 5 spells cast, your damage gets increased by 10% for a few seconds. The cape, the Limher's cape, provides energy sustain. Mages typically need more energy than your average build, so having that energy sustain here is just great to have. We also have energy sustain on the Royal Sandals with the Energetic Sprint. That's your second form of mobility together with Frost Nova. So you are pretty mobile with this build as well. On the helm, you have the Cowl of Purity with the Avalonian Beam, which is an offensive helm that also has an interrupt to it. You do damage when you use this ability. Looks like this. It also does damage over time on top of the initial damage. And like I said, it interrupts enemy spell casting. So if you see a target like the healer is super low and they try to get a final heal in, you can use the Avalonian Beam to stop them from a distance. As for your rope, the pay scale rope, we went over this rope a couple times already on the other builds, which kind of shows that it's a very meta and very viable armor to pick. When you use this ability, it goes through 3 different buffs. The first one is the fire buff, which summons a ring around you like this, and anyone that gets in contact with it gets feared away, so they walk away from you. They also receive some damage on top of that. The second one is the Storm Shield, which when you activate that one, you get a buff that increases your resistances, making you more tanky for a bit, and it does damage every time someone damages you, plus it stuns them. So if you have something like a carving sword that's chasing you down, you could use that one as well, especially if they are on top of you already, and the fire ring won't do its job for you as a defensive tool. This one looks like this, just so you know what it looks like. Very strong defensive option as well. If you already downed one person or 2 of them, and you have the luxury of using another offensive ability, then sure, the Frozen Fragments ability can come in very handy as well, just to get that final quick kill. Looks like this, and when you attack someone, it reduces their current and max health, so it's a good DPS option on your armor. On to the consumables, we have the Resistance Pot on this build, pretty much the option to go for. As I said, you are very squishy. You do have some mobility, but something like the Carving Sword has even more mobility. So having that resistance pot for extra defenses, for extra crowd control, is just very handy to have. For food, you want to take the beef stew for more damage. You will do so much damage with this build, with your E, with your Q, with your helmet. So boosting all of that is just very nice in this build. Then we have possible swaps. If you aren't confident yet and you want more of a defensive tool defensive option for your helm, you can go with the Guardian Helm, which makes for a shield that affects you, but also allies near you. The shield is bigger when your HP is below 40%, and it looks like this. If you do use this helmet, don't hold on to it until you are below 40%, because fights are typically quite long, so you can use that helmet multiple times throughout the fight. So the moment they jump on you, you can already proc your helm to negate some of that damage. And a possible swap for your shoes is the Stalker shoes, where you can go either Refreshing Sprint for movement speed and cooldown reduction, or you can go Raging Blink, which brings your total blinks from 1 to 3. Because the Raging Blink you can use twice back to back, although if you use it twice, cooldown will be higher. If you only need to use it once, just use it once. So you can basically teleport around 3 times with this build if you use it as your option. If you go for the Stalker shoes, just go for the Quick Tinker passive. And with the Guardian Helmet, go for the Toughness passive. But honestly, I wouldn't really recommend those swaps, because the build, as it is right now, is the perfect build for the Arctic Staff. Which means I need to swap back to the Royal Sandals. Now, when you play the Arctic Staff or have one in your team, you do want a comp build around it, because it has a very specific playstyle and it needs setup. So what you want to have, aside from a healer, is a tanky fella that can CC the enemy a lot. Something like a Tomb Hammer is good, Forgehammers are great, even the Heron Spear would work, or maybe even something like the Grail Seeker, just anything that has a lot of CC in its arsenal. Because the Arctic Staff is a full kite weapon and it's very squishy, so you need that support from your team to make it work. The Arctic Staff is great in my opinion. It does have a high skill ceiling, so you will need some practice if you want to make the most out of this build. It's very important you hit all of your abilities on this build, because the moment you miss 1 or 2 of your abilities, all the pressure you've built up is instantly gone. If you enjoyed this build overview, make sure to give this video a like, and if you want more Albion content like this, make sure to subscribe to my channel as well. And if you have any questions about the build, you can always ask them in the comments, or you can join the Discord community and we will help you out there as well. On to the final DPS build in the list. Before we get to the healers, we have the Rotcaller. And there's something I need to show about this build straight away, because you can play it in very different ways. You can play it as I have it in the loadout right here, where you use the Assassin Hood to reset your abilities, the Judicator Armor for the Team White buff, also Plate Armor right, so you are super tanky, or you can play it in a complete different setup with something like the Guardian Helmet, which provides Team White defenses, and the Phase Scale Rope, which makes for a lot of damage and utility and defenses, but is cloth, so you are very squishy. So you have different options with this build. I'm going to go over the abilities first, and then I'm going to explain everything about the builds. Let's first start with going through the abilities for a quick overview. You can select Cursed Sickle or Cursed Star on this one. Also, the passives are pretty flexible. On the Assassin Hood, you just want to go for lower cooldowns. On the Judicator Armor, you want increased defenses on your passive. This one doesn't matter, as it's for PvE, not PvP. On any of the leather shoes, you want to go for Refreshing Sprint with Quick Tinker once more. The Thetford Cape is a very solid option with the Rotcaller. Resistance Pots and Beef Stew are the way to go. Or actually, Eel Stew is the way to go. And you want to have the Mist Color for lower cooldowns. And then we have the cloth version to the right here, where on the Rotcaller, once again, you can take either of these abilities. Most of the passives work as well with this build. On the Guardian Helmet, you want Toughness for the passive. On the Phase Scale Rope, you want Aggression for the passive. And on the Stalker shoes, you want Quick Tinker, actually. So this covers both in a glimpse. Now let's go over all the abilities and how to actually play this build. So the Rotcaller staff has a dot on its Q, and you can either use this pool, which makes for additional dot ticks as long as people stand on it, or you can go for the sickle. I feel like it's a personal preference, because one is easier than the other. I feel like this one, because it's so slow, I feel it's a bit more difficult. but you know, the pool people can walk out of it, and this is more of a skill shot, so you can kind of anticipate where people are going to walk to. So either one of these two work. Now the W, you want to have Armor Piercer, which does some damage, but more importantly, it reduces enemy resistances, which is a huge debuff, and this build is all about pressure. Then for the unique ability, the reason why we take the Rotcaller, we have the ability that deals quite some damage, knocks enemies back, and negates their healing received completely for a couple seconds. Looks like this. And one thing you need to know about this ability is that the knockback it has is only in the area close to you. There is like a circle right in front of you where people get CC'd. Otherwise, they don't get CC'd. But the healing received effect is really what this is about. But, you know, if you see someone casting an ability that can be interrupted, you can also use this ability to stop them at the same time. Now, for the passive, since we don't have any energy sources, it's very wise to take the energetic passive on this weapon. If you do take something like a Limhurst Cape, then you can take the Furious passive for increased damage if you'd want to, or the Hit and Run for more mobility. But I personally feel like the energetic passive works very well, so you can have something else for your cape slot. Talking about capes, I have the Thetford Cape equipped on this build, which does a lightning AoE every 15 seconds on your auto attack. For the helm, you can take the Guardian Helm, which makes for the emergency shield ability, which applies a big shield on you and all allies inside a circle. You want to use this as much as possible. A lot of people fall into the trap that they wait until they're below 40% because the shield is bigger. However, fights are typically very extended, very long in the depths, so the moment someone jumps you, you can just use the emergency shield and negate some of that initial damage already, and then probably use it once or twice more throughout the fight. For the passive, you want to take Toughness for your defenses. Then you have the Phase Scale Rope, which makes you very squishy, but provides huge offensive stats. And on it, you have an ability that can do 3 different things, depending on what you need. The first one is a fire AoE that does damage, but more importantly, anyone that gets in contact with it gets feared away. So since you are very squishy, it's very nice to have a fear. You can also go for the second one, the Storm Shield, which increases your resistances, making you a bit more tanky for a couple seconds. And when enemies hit you, they receive damage, plus they also get stunned. So if you have something like a Carving Sword on you, just proc the Storm Shield and kite away. You also have the Frozen Fragments ability on the Phase Scale Rope, which is an offensive one you could use as well if you have the luxury to do so, if you don't need to use it for the defensive options it has. Looks like this. You get 5 ice balls around you, and every time you attack, you do max HP and current HP damage. For the boot option, the Stalker shoes work very well with this build, where you take the Refreshing Sprint for mobility and reduced cooldowns, with the Quick Tinker passive for additional cooldowns. So the Rotcaller is a one-handed weapon, and you can take an offhand with it, and you should. And the most viable option is the Musak, although you could also take the Mistcaller. I'll get into that in just a little. But the Musak, it increases your physical, magical abilities and offensive capabilities, but it does increase the energy cost of your abilities as well. So if you notice that, hey, energetic isn't enough, just make sure to swap to a Limhurst Cape, because the Musak will make your energy costs way higher. But since this offhand makes for additional offensive capabilities, you just apply that much more pressure with this build. For the pot, you want to have a resistance pot. You are very squishy in cloth armor, so having those extra defenses and crowd control resistance for 6 seconds will save you in many fights. And for food, you could go with beef stew, but eel stew is the sweet spot between offense and cooldown, so this has my preference for this build. Now that we went over this build, let's quickly go over the build I have saved in my loadout. This one wears plate armor with the Judicator armor and the Assassin hood and the Mistcaller offhand, so let's equip those real fast. Just a couple tweaks, but a complete different playstyle. You still do the same thing, which is apply pressure through your dots, through your pierce and through the negated healing received. However, now you are in plate armor and you can be up in the enemy's face. Especially if you combine it with the resistance spot, you'll be super tanky. Now the Judicator armor has the Force Shield ability, which looks like this. Every one of your allies that stand in it receive additional resistances, meaning they receive less damage as long as they are inside it, and their healing received is increased by 30% on top of that. So it's a very strong buff that makes your allies tankier and supports the entire team. On the helm, when you take this Judicator armor, you can go with the Assassin Hood, which has meditation, which reduces the cooldowns of your abilities. So if we use them here, and I use my helm here, you can see that my armor piercer is back up, and my unique ability only has a few seconds remaining on it. Be aware though, the meditation ability is a channel. It's almost 3 seconds to fully cast, so you don't want to be around crowd control because you can get interrupted. When you play this build with the Judy armor and the Assassin Hood, it's ideal to take the Mist color for overall lower cooldowns. Back to the offensive build, which looks like this. Some possible swaps you can do to either one of the builds is you can take the Helmet of Valor, which comes with the Purifying Smoke, which when you hit allies with it, it cleanses all crowd control effects on them and all debuffs. So that way it can be used defensively. But if you use it on enemies, it purges all buffs they have on them. So any shields they have, any defensive, any offensive things they have, you can just purify with this ability. If you don't have a purge in your team, it's crucial you take it on the Rotcaller. You can also go with the Cowl of Purity, where you have the Avalonian Beam. This is an offensive option, which is a laser that does damage, and after doing the initial damage, it also does damage over time. But most importantly, it interrupts enemy spellcasting from a distance. When you fully negated the enemy healer's healing received with your unique ability, like this, and you see they try to get in a final heal after the debuff is over, you can interrupt them with this helm, which makes it super viable on this build. And I want to say about the Cowl of Purity and the Guardian Helmet, although I showed the Guardian Helmet as my first pick, it's because it's a more beginner-friendly approach to it. If you are a bit more skilled, definitely the Cowl of Purity has my preference. Another option you can take with this build is the Hood of Tenacity, which has the Nasty Wounds ability, which makes for an AoE around you that damages enemies and also reduces their healing received and healing cost by 50% for 4 seconds, which is a huge debuff. Combined with your unique ability, this build just has a ton of healing debuff when you use it like this. So as you can see, this build has a lot of helm options, with my preference being the Cowl of Purity. For the armors, another option you have is the Cleric Robe, which is Clot as well, but when you get hit, you get the Everlasting Spirit Shield, which makes you immune to damage for 3 seconds, while simultaneously boosting your damage throughout its duration. A very viable option as well, but you need to get hit once after you use it to have it procced. Then for the boots, you could go with the Cultist Sandals or any other of the sandals in the game for energetic sprint if you notice you need more energy. And that pretty much covers all the different gear you can take with this build. So depending on your playstyle, pick and match however you see fit. Now that we went over the build, let's go over the possible comps where the Rotcaller fits, which is many of them. Honestly, because of the unique ability of this weapon, it's a very strong pick. It's a top tier pick that you can put in any team, especially since you have the option to go plate as well. You can easily combine it with anything you want to. You could go for the plate version and then have something like a carving sword on cloth armor and have that extra pierce combined with your pierce, combined with all the healing shutdown, and have a high pressure team like that. You could play it with something like the Forgehammers, where the Forgehammer can jump in the backline of the enemy team and you can play front to back with this setup. You can combine it with anything really. It works with anything if you ask me, but choose the right build depending on who you go with. So if you have someone that's tankier, you can go with the cloth setup. If you have something that's squishier, you can go with the plate setup. If you have any questions about this build, ask them in the comments and I will do my best to answer them. You can also join the Discord community and people will help you out there as well, as will I. And if you found this build overview helpful, make sure to give this video a like and also feel free to subscribe for more Albion Online content. Alright guys, we're finally at the final builds where we cover the healers. And I'll go slightly different about this. I will cover healer as a whole in this section. And in the overview, I showed you guys the Holy Staff and the Lifetouch Staff. But I'm also going to cover Hellfall and Redemption here. And all four of these are very viable options. I will go slightly different about covering healer because there are so many different options you can do as a healer and they all work with different weapons. So let's just look at what the healer is about, starting with the weapon and the first ability. You'll basically always want to be on generous heal. No matter which weapon you take, you want to be on generous heal. It's a single target heal with very low cooldown that obviously heals and also increases healing received by 5% for 4 seconds, which stacks up 3 times. So you'll want to use this on yourself, on your allies, whoever is low, pretty much continuously. You'll almost never catch yourself not using this ability. On the W, you have 2 options. You have the Holy Blessing, which blesses a single target and increases their armor and their healing received. And it also grants immunity to forced movement effects. So it's a very strong buff that really boosts the healing a target gets. It's an instant cast, so if someone, you know, is about to drop, you can just drop the Holy Blessing on them and heal with your other abilities. That's one option you have on all healing staffs. And the other option you have is the Holy Beam, which you have most likely seen already. A very strong option as well. If you go for the Holy Beam, make sure to go for the Ascended passive on the weapon, because what this does is when you use your W ability, Holy Beam, it cannot be interrupted. The Holy Beam looks like this. So it's a huge, huge heal. And you can move around, although you are a bit slowed, you can move around whilst you are casting this ability. And the fill channel just does a ton of healing. So depending on your comp, depending on your preference, what you need, either one of these two work. If you go for the Holy Blessing, however, go back to Adrenaline-driven Charity, which increases your overall healing every 4 spells cast. So now let's get to the unique ability of each of these weapons, starting with the Holy Staff. The Holy Staff has Desperate Prayer, which is an instant cast like this. It has a very low cooldown. And aside from healing, depending on how healthy the target is, the lower they are, the higher the heal is. It also makes for a buff, which increases healing cast by 5%, which stacks up to 3 times. So a smart tactic is to just use this ability already before the fight even starts and get those stacks going. You don't want to be too greedy with this one. Just use it, you know, it has a very low cooldown. Don't wait until someone is below 40% health, unless they are like 44, 45% health, and you know that in the next little window they're going to receive that hit that brings them below 40% health, then sure. But if they are like 80%, 90%, like don't be greedy, don't hold on to it for no reason. Another weapon you can use is the Lifetouch Staff, as we went over it in the overview. A very strong option as well, but very different. It has a lower range than the one-handed Holy Staff, but it does a complete different thing. It's a channel ability. It looks like this. You can cast it on yourself as well. And it's a burst heal, so it does a lot of healing in a very short amount of time. It also cleanses crowd control effects and removes debuffs. And also, when you use it on other allies, they get immunity to crowd control. So, a very strong option, but a way higher skill ceiling. So, if you want an easier time, go for the Holy Staff instead, until you are more comfortable healing. Another option you have as the healer is the Hellfall Staff. And this one is really cool if you want more mobility, a bit more of an offensive approach to healing, because this one is a very cool leap heal. It's an AoE, it heals everyone you hit with it, and you become immune to damage, debuffs, crowd control. So you have like an iframe as you use it. Although the heal isn't as strong as other weapons, it does come with mobility, which is nice to have on the healer. And make sure to hit this one because when you hit the target, you basically have a lower cooldown with it. And finally, we have the Redemption Staff, which is two-handed, unlike the other three. Redemption Staff also high skill ceiling, I would say. What this does is it sends out an orb, a sphere that bounces between allies and heals them on each tick. Looks like this. Yeah, there we go. I thought it wasn't gonna proc, but it does. Very cool ability, but you know, your allies need to be close to each other for it to work. So it has an additional mechanic to it, or additional communications are required to pull it off, basically. So back to the Holy Staff, and we will equip the Mist Collar with that. Let's talk about the different options you have as an offhand as the healer. You can go with the Mist Collar, which is by far the most popular one. It reduces your overall cooldowns, so, you know, faster heals, faster mobility, faster everything basically, faster defenses. Just a very solid option. It's probably the one you'll want to pick up most of the time. Another option for the healers is the Eye of Secrets, which increases your max energy and also makes for an energy source. So if you have energy issues in general, you can go for the Eye of Secrets, which is a very solid pick as well. Starting with the Limher's Cape, this one makes for energy. As a healer, you will be spamming your heals, so having an energy source is required as a healer. The more you have, the better actually. Another cape that's very viable is the Carleon Cape. If you have other energy sources, you can go for the Carleon Cape for more healing in general. What this one does is it resets your Q immediately every 30 seconds, every time it's off cooldown. So it's going to look like this. Cast your Q back to back like that. And the final option you have for your cape as a healer is the Brazilian Cape. Now this one activates when you cast your head slot. It has a way higher cooldown with 1 minute. But whenever you cast your helm ability, it immediately procs a shield that absorbs quite some damage, and it also grants you immunity to purges while the shield is active. So if, let's say, you proc your Cleric Robe, which is an ability people will typically try to get off with a purge, if you combine that with your helmet and proc the Brazilian Cape's shield, they won't be able to remove your Cleric Robe either. And it's going to look like this. Alright, that's it for the capes. Let's go back to the Limher's Cape. Then we have the Resistance Spot. Honestly, your only option as a healer, you are going to get focused 100% of the time. So having those extra defenses on your pot is highly necessary. It's not even recommended, it's necessary. Take the Resistance Spot whenever you play a healer. For your food option, you want to go with the Pork Omelette, which increases your cast speed and reduces your overall cooldowns. Cooldowns is just very handy to have on a healer. Now, this one is 0.2. It's 84k. Don't go with this one. Just pick a flat one. I didn't have a flat one in my bank, but definitely go with the flat tier 7, which is about 8k, I think. I'm not entirely sure. But it's a very cheap option and a very good pick for any healer. Now for the helmets, starting with the Royal Cowl. The Royal Cowl is a very solid option that basically nullifies your energy cost for 15 seconds. And since it has a 26-second cooldown, which will be lower once you use the Pork Omelette, you'll pretty much have infinite energy with the Royal Cowl alone. So the Limher's Cape might be unnecessary when you run the Royal Cowl, unless your experience shows different. So you could go for one of the other options whenever playing the Royal Cowl. But if you still have energy issues, just stick to the combination of these two. Or this one, of course, instead of the Limher's Cape. You want the aggression passive on this one to increase healing cast, not damage this time. Another very good helmet option is the Guardian Helm, which gives you a shield, which becomes even stronger when you are below 40% health. Not only does it affect you, but every ally around you as well. So, a very good defensive option for healers. You can go for the Scholar Cowl as well, which increases your resistances, both armor and magic resistance. And while it's active, whenever you take damage, you will restore energy. So this is a really good pick as well, which not only gives you energy, but also defenses. And the final pick would be the Mercenary Hood. If you need an additional cleanse, then just pick any of the leather hoods and make sure to have the second cleanse right here, because you already have one on your boots, but sometimes teams just have a lot of CC. So if your experience shows you need more cleanses, just go for any of the leather hoods. Up next, let's talk about the armors. Once again, you have a lot of options. The Cleric Robe is a pretty traditional one, which will grant you a shield when you activate it and someone hits you. It's required to proc it, but you basically become immune to damage for 3 seconds and your healing cost gets increased as well. Another option is the Robe of Purity, which gives you a bubble around you that knocks enemies back. It also deals damage, which is a tiny extra thing, but more importantly, it also grants you immunity to forced movement effects. So if people try to isolate you from your team with CC, such as knockbacks, like the Robe of Purity itself, you can basically activate this one, so you won't be affected by their crowd control. It's really good to keep people off you, but I would say it has a bit of a higher skill ceiling compared to the Cleric Robe. Another option is the Face Scale Robe. Now this is a very aggressive option. It can be very effective. I would say this is probably the most difficult one of all. But the Face Scale Robe can provide you 2 buffs. The Ring of Fire, which will fear enemies that get in touch with it. Or you can use the second ability, which is Storm Shield, which increases your resistances. And whenever enemies damage you, not only do they receive damage, but they also get stunned. So that is another option you can take. But once again, you know, if you are just starting out, go with the Cleric Robe or maybe even the Robe of Purity instead. Then you have a final option for your armor, the only leather armor on the list. All of these are cloth, and this one is leather. So you will be a bit tankier on this one, but your healing cost bonus is less because leather armor makes for higher defensive bonuses, but lower offensive bonuses. So where this one, the Cleric Robe has 53%, the Robe of Purity has 58%, and the Face Scale Robe has 58% as well to healing cost bonus. The Mistwalker Jacket only has 34%. So your overall healing will be less. However, you will have access to the Mist Cloud ability, which makes you completely immune for a very long time. Not only does it affect you, but your allies as well, which is definitely a viable armor to use as a healer as well. Back to the Cleric Robe we go, and we go over the shoes. Starting with the most popular one by far, the Mercenary shoes. Mercenary has the Break Free ability, which makes for a dash that removes all crowd control effects. So it looks like this, and it's very necessary to have a cleanse in your build as a healer. This one can even be used while stunned or silenced, so it's really a lifesaver. If you need more of a cleanse, like a second cleanse, you can definitely go with any of the leather hoods like I mentioned so far. But that just emphasizes how important cleanses are on healers. Another boot option you have is the Mistwalker shoe. It's definitely a viable one. If you know LeBlanc from League of Legends, it's very similar to one of her abilities. And it looks like this. You basically blink away and then can cast it again to return to your original location. If you don't cast it, you will stay wherever you went to. So it's a very strong ability as well, but it does mean you won't have a cleanse in your build. So if you go for this one, definitely consider the Mercenary Hood. As for the passives on all of these armors, anything that increases healing cast. So whether it's Balanced Mind or Aggression, just anything that increases healing cast. Alright, that wraps it up for all the different armors and build possibilities for the healers. The healer is the backbone of any team, and any team will heavily benefit from having one. It is a high pressure role. You know, you will get stressed a lot. It comes with the job description, but you know, you will be the hidden carry of any team. A good healer makes all the difference in a fight. So If you are up for the task, you know, I hope this build overview, the healer build guide I just provided you with, helped you out to become better at healing. If this video made for any value for you, please give it a like. And if you want more Albion Online content in general, feel free to subscribe to my channel as well. If you have any further questions, you can ask them in the comments below, or you can join the Discord community. That was it for today's video, a very long video with a ton of information. I really hope I helped out some people with this video. I hope to see you guys in the comments and on the Discord server, and perhaps in game as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.